Hello, hello. Hi, Tammy. Thanks for being patient. I didn't expect that. They had gone. My son is he started school last month up in Dallas, which is about 2.5 hours. And I hadn't seen him since he started, and he came down to visit his son. They went swimming and they just walked in the door literally at a minute before 3 p.m. And I'm like, you guys, I'm about to go live. So, life happens. So, it's not like I had 10 people beating down the door. So, I did try to find, we're getting into their dynamics in Scientology, or at least the precursor to it. And I was trying to find a good diagram just before I went on, like a few minutes before, so that I could share the screen with it. But I just couldn't find one that would sit right on my screen. But he doesn't, funny enough, he doesn't use the diagram in this chapter. So I'm wondering, because, this is the precursor to this other stuff that he wrote later. So, and when I was looking for the graph or diagram, it was the 8 dynamics. And when I was looking through this, I thought I only saw 4 dynamics, maybe. Well, when we get into it, this one might be one of those that hurts our heads. I was looking, if I can eliminate, hi Scooter Mom, if I can eliminate any of his long-winded uh, examples. That's what he does, is he'll say something and then spend half a page of an example to try to break it down and explain it. I'll try to see if I can cut some of that out, because I think this is about 15 pages. So if it goes too long, we'll try to do half. Hi Diana. Yeah, I was late. My son and my grandson and his girlfriend and her son all walked in the door at 3 o'clock, like a minute to 3. I'm like, you guys. But even my dogs don't know how to deal with it, because they're not used to people being in the house. So there's hardly ever visitors at my house. Yeah, with the big words he said he wouldn't use. Exactly. I know, right? That's what's killing me, is the ridiculous words that he uses. So we're going to jump right in since I'm running late and it's long. All right. So this is the emotion and the dynamics. And I don't know how much you guys have listened to the survivors, ex-members, second gens, talking about the dynamics sometimes. So that's why I'm kind of interested in what he has to say about it. Of course. So yeah, I think this might be a little, we'll have to see. As I was skimming it, it looked like one of those chapters. All right. I'm going to try to read faster than usual too, because it's long. So we're not here for 3 hours. All right. Let me get a drink real quick. Some caffeine. Oh, and I am going on 1 hour sleep. I had a rough night. Partly because my son was here. We were up late. And then after that, I couldn't fall asleep. So he's kind of... And I had no warning. Friday night, he called and said, hey, can I come crash on your couch? And I'm like, of course. I expected him to do that every once in a while, because he comes down to visit his son. And he's like, good, because I'm here. I'm like, luckily Tom was still here, because I was just getting in the bathtub. All right. Okay, I don't know what this symbol means. He describes it. I'm going to show it to you, though. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Probably not. It's like a zero with a line in it, like across it, not like, and it means, I'm going to tell you what it means. Emotion is a zero quantity, which is to say that it is so involved with life forces that Dianetics at this stage handles it with invariable success, but does not attempt to give forth more than a descriptive theory. Okay, that zero means theta, the eighth letter in the Greek alphabet. I didn't know that. Greek for thought or life or the spirit. You know how he likes not. You know how he likes to steal. He's even using Greek alphabet. But then again, he wants to sound smart. So emotion is so should I say zero or theta or O? He doesn't say that. Oh well. I don't know if he's going to talk about it again. He says, but does not attempt to give forth more than a descriptive theory. Much research must be done on emotion, but so long as the therapy embraces it and releases it with success, further data can be dispensed with up to a point. I'm very interested now. There he goes, changing things again. Yep. I'm kind of interested in this because he likes to tamp down a lot of emotion. So I'm very curious as to how this chapter is going to go. All right. Emotion would have been... All right, let me try that again. Emotion would have to be divided sharply into minus emotions and plus emotions. The minus emotions would be non-survival in character. The plus emotion would be pro-survival. The pleasant and pleasurable emotions are not of any great concern to us here. It is believed that all emotion is the same thing, but in its aspects above zone 1, it can be bypassed as unnecessary to explain at this time for the purpose of this book. The pleasant and pleasurable emotions are not of any great concern to us here. That kind of says a lot, actually, because we kind of already know that. In zones 1 and 0, emotion becomes very important to therapy. I can't believe he's using the word therapy. As has been covered earlier, zones 1 and 0 are the anger and apathy zones, respectively. From death up to the border between anger and fear is zone 0. From this borderline to the beginning of boredom is anger, zone 1. Oh, wow. Okay, the only diagram he has used is this one in the front. All right, this one. Yeah, this is it. But it's so confusing that I think even if I put it on the screen, you'd still be confused. It is as if the survival dynamic in becoming contracted into zone 1 first began to display hostility, then on further suppression toward death, anger. On further suppression, rage began to be displayed, then fear as the next lower level, then terror, and finally, just above death, apathy. Okay, I'm going to keep that diagram ready to go. Where'd it go? All right, there it is. All right. Now, I wish I would have realized this was the diagram. I thought he was using the diagram for... All right, so if you can see that, so you can get a look at the zones and the survival. All right, I'll give you there. Interesting line graph, I know. Graphs make you look make things more important. Okay, so at the bottom, zone 0, well, he doesn't even have those things wrote out. He just has the zones. And as the dynamic is suppressed, the cells react forcibly to the menace. It could be said, by resisting the menace, the analyzer resists down to the top border of zone 1, but in ever decreasing control. From here on down, the cells, the actual organism, do the resisting in a last-ditch effort. The reactive mind is thoroughly in command from the top border of zone 1 straight on down to death, and it is in ever increasing command of the organism as the dynamic is suppressed. It's going to be very hard to follow this. Emotion seems to be inextricably connected up with the actual force of life. Well, we kind of already know that. Again, he's breaking down like basic human reactions or the way we live that we already know. We already know these things, but he's breaking it down in this scientific way, because all of us know if you're in a positive mood, you can sometimes get well from an illness, or something like that. We already know that. So that there is a life force no engineer could doubt. Man and medicine usually look at the pitcher and forget that the pitcher is only there to hold milk and that the milk is the important quantity. Life force is the helium which fills the free balloon. Out goes the helium, down comes the balloon. When this type of energy is located and isolated as itself, if it is just an energy type, then medicine can start moving forward in strides, which will make all former steps look like those of a man in a sack race. Medicine doesn't have any spare helium, for one thing. How high this life force can go on the survival scale is not known. Above zone 3, the area of question marks, a clear goes up into a level of persistence, vigor, tenacity, rationality, and happiness. Perhaps someday a clear will attain the nebulosity the author used to hear about in India, which marked the man who was all soul. I kind of understand what he's saying there to a point. So he said a clear, because we were talking about clears before. Yep. All right. A clear goes up into a level of persistence. Oh, okay. How far down it can go is definitely known. A man dies. He doesn't move or think. He dies as an organism. Then he dies as cells. There are different periods of life after death for the cells, and biologists remark that the hair and nail cells do not die for months. So here is a spectrum of death. First the organism, and then colony by colony, the cells. Hey, Parody. Something I heard recently. I heard all my life that your hair and nails continue to grow after death. Now, I've heard I'm losing the word I want. Not necessarily scientists or people that know about this actually said that they really don't continue to grow, that the skin on the hands and the skull shrink so that it looks like they continue to grow. Don't know 100% who's right. That's just things that I've heard. So remember that he wrote this in the 50s, 70 years ago, and a lot of medicine has changed. Hi, A. Good to have you here. Am I right, Parody? Is that what you're talking about? The skin retracts. That's what I've heard the last 20 years. So, well, maybe not that long. I don't know when I first heard it. But yeah. So that's why I'm curious to see in a newer book if any of this has been corrected. But then again, no, they wouldn't. Why? Because we know that if you've watched anything recently about, there's a school district that was using the Narcanon paraphernalia literature for their anti-drug campaign in school, and they realized the science in it was total quackery. And so they're looking into it, and we need to let other school districts in places like that are using their stuff know. I mean, he said some wacky crap about THC. Death is death. Yeah. So if I think they're going to be smart and update this, and then I think about that, no, they wouldn't. So that is from the bottom of zone 0 downward. But what we are interested in this area from zone 1 down to the bottom of zone 0. It could be postulated that the analytical mind has its great bounce against the suppressor, its highest ability to care for the organism, when it is in the 3rd zone, as the suppressor thrusts downward against it. The analyzer, which is the brain, hey Fuzzy. Gotta make it sound good. So sometimes it can be pretty interesting. Sometimes this one, when he starts getting into these numbers, that's when it starts to get pretty dry. But what I was going to say is, like here, he could just say the brain, but he has to call it the analyzer. That's the kind of stuff that gets me. As the suppressor thrusts downward against it, the analyzer with lower zone 3 thrusts heavily back. This is necessity at work. The necessity level can rise in this action to a point which keys out all engrams. Key out. The engram drops away without being erased. Well, doesn't that just mean it gets hidden in your subconscious? Something like that? That's weird. It must be realized that the analyzer, the brain, considers future suppressors and is continually engaged upon computations which pose problems of the future, which the analyzer resolves. Kind of like what the brain is supposed to do. This is one of the functions of the imagination. Oh, not the imagination. No. Are we allowed to have an imagination? Let's find out. Yeah, spiritual death is a different discussion. Yeah. Beam me up, Scotty. Word salads for sure. That's why I said, remember, Scientology started as Dianetics centers, and they have classes, workbooks, DVDs, everything, because you would literally have to have somebody explain this to you. I don't believe anybody that could sit here. If I read this by myself, I mean, you guys help me a lot, because sometimes my eyes just want to cross. Come in and forget your analyzer. Diana. Yeah. Okay. It must further be realized that the analyzer is engaged upon a multitude of computations about the present, for the analytical mind is dealing continually with an enormous number of factors which comprise the suppressor of the present and the suppressor of the future. It computes, for instance, on the alliances with friends and symbiotes, and its greatest victories are achieved by taking some of the suppressor and turning it into an alliance factor. AA, have you ever read Dianetics? Did you say you couldn't do it? Took me 3 months to get through that book. Oh, well, you just answered my question. I can understand. Totally understand it taking that long. Honestly, if I didn't have a little bit of an idea of things that he already taught or that they did, it kind of, now that I'm reading it, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. Yes, L Ron Fuzzy can fix your analyzer. He said so. It's all the power I got, Captain. She's going to blow. I can't do a Scottish accent, even though I'm 46% Scottish. All right. This suppressor and turning it into an alliance factor, I don't understand. The individual can be visualized on the survival spectrum as being at the tip of the survival dynamic. The suppressor thrusts down, or future suppressors threatened a thrust, and the analytical mind thrusts up with solutions. The level of the individual is determined by how well these suppressors are apparently met. That sounds like just worries and stresses in my life, is what it sounds like to me. We speak now of the clear, and until further mention, we will continue to use the clear. The clear is an unaberrated person. He is rational in that he forms the best possible solutions he can on the data he has and from his viewpoint. He obtains the maximum pleasure for the organism, present and future, as well as for the subjects along the other dynamics. The clear has no engrams which can be restimulated to throw out the correctness of computation by entering hidden and false data into it. No aberration. Hence the reason we use him here as an example. Analytical analyzer. Oh, ow, that hurt. This is making sense. You might need to get your analyzer checked. It is making sense. Okay, I'm glad. I kind of get it. Like if I try to think about what he really means without the big words, I can kind of get what he's trying to say. If he would have broke this down simpler, well, like I said, the book would have probably been about that big, and more people probably would have understood it. Parody. Okay. The survival dynamic is high, more than balancing the suppressor. Takes this as a first condition. This would place the dynamic in zone 3, tone 3.9. Now increase the suppressor. The dynamic is pushed back to tone 3.2. Necessity surges up. The suppressor is thrust back. The dynamic is once more at tone 3.9. This action could be termed an enthusiastic resurgence. The individual has actually gotten angry. That is to say, he has called upon his being to furnish power for thought and action. Mentally, he calls upon whatever constitutes mental energy. Physically, if the suppression was physical, he would call upon his adrenaline. This is proper use of the endocrines, to use them for regaining position in relation to the suppressor. Any and all body function is under analytical, but not necessarily monitored, command. Fuzzy, no joke. Yeah, it probably was. Back when this was written, it probably was a little bit simpler. All right. Now let us suppose that the suppressor surges down against the dynamic and drives the dynamic to 3.0. Necessity level comes up, action is taken, the full force of the being is thrown against the suppressor. Now let us suppose that a new factor comes into the suppressor and makes it much, much stronger. The individual still attempts to resurge against it, but the suppressor weighs heavier and heavier against him. He is beginning to exhaust his supplies of mental or physical energy, and this suppressor can be on either a mental or physical level. Wearying, the individual drops down to a 2.5. The suppressor again increases. Resurgence is attempted once more. The last supply of available energy or data is thrown out, and another factor comes into the suppressor, increasing its weight. The individual sags down to 2.0. At exactly this point, the analyzer, having failed, finally cuts out, increasing its weight. The individual sinks down to 2.0. Oh, I said that part. At exactly this point, the analyzer, having failed, finally cuts out. Here is entered the top of zone 1. Hostility sets in. The suppressor is down, pressing down against actual cellular survival, and it drops lower. The individual goes into anger, recruiting cellularly but not sentiently the last forces. Again, the suppressor gets new weight. The individual goes into rage. Once more, the suppressor drops. The individual goes into fear, tone 0.9. Again, the suppressor lowers, recruiting new factors. The individual is thrust down to 0.6, and here is in terror. Once more, the suppressor drops with new force. The individual slides into fear paralysis, 0.2. So, if he was saying it correctly, 0 is, he's probably about to say it, so I don't really have to find it. I had it marked. There it is. I gotta mark that. Yeah, so below 0 is obviously death. Yes, AA, thank you. A suppressor. Let me look that up. See what he says. I forget too. Suppressor. The exterior forces which reduce the chances of the survival of any form. So I guess any exterior negative force. So it could be emotional, could be physical, could be another person, could be your own thoughts, I guess. The environment. So that's what I'm going to take it as. All right. Where were we? Suppose we parallel this in a very simple dramatic example so that we do not have to consider 1,000 subtle factors. He's going to explain it. A clear, inexperienced in hunting, determines to shoot a grizzly. He has a fine rifle. The grizzly appears to be easy game. The man is at a 3.9 or above. He feels good. He is going to get that grizzly. As the grizzly has been threatening the man's stock, high enthusiasm carries him to the lair. He waits. He finally sees the grizzly. There is a cliff above the man which he could not ordinarily climb, but to get a good shot before the grizzly vanishes, the man has to climb the cliff. Seeing he was in danger of losing the game brought the man down to 3.2. Necessity sends him up the cliff. He fires, but in firing falls back down the cliff. The grizzly is wounded. He starts towards the man. Necessity surges up. The man recovers the gun and shoots again. He is at 3.0 the moment he shoots. He misses. He fires again, but the miss with the grizzly charging brought him down to a 2.5. He shoots once more. The grizzly takes the ball and keeps on coming. The man shoots again, but he has suddenly realized that his rifle is not going to stop this grizzly. His tone drops to 2.0. He begins to snarl and feverishly work his gun. His bullets go wild. He experiences rage at the gun, the grizzly, the world, and throws the gun away, ready to meet the grizzly, almost upon him with bare hands. Suddenly, the man knows fear. His tone is 1.2. It drops to 0.9 with a smell in his nostrils of the bear. He knows the bear will kill him. He turns and tries to claw up the cliff and get away, but his efforts are frenzied. He is at tone 0.6, dark terror. The bear strikes him and knocks him from the cliffside. The man lies still, breathing almost halted, heartbeat slowed to nearly nothing. The bear hits him again, and the man lies still. Then the bear decides he is dead and walks away. Shaken, the man eventually comes round, his tone gradually rising up to 2.0, the point where his analyzer shuts off. He stirs more and gets up. His tone is back to 2.5. He is analytically afraid and cautious. He recovers his gun. He begins to leave the scene. He feels a great necessity to recoup his own self-esteem, and his tone comes to 3.2. He walks away and reaches a safe area. Suddenly it occurs to him that he can borrow a friend's Mauser. He begins to make plans to get that bear. His enthusiasm mounts, but completely aside from the engram received when the bear knocked him out, he acts on his experience. 3 days later, he kills the bear, and his tone rises to 4.0 for the space of contemplation and telling the tale, and then his mind occupies itself with new matters. Okay. My head hurts. Yeah. I mean, he was showing a physical example of a suppressor, which was the bear, but he also does say there are mental suppressors. We all know that. We all know that just from living life, that there's, mental suppressors that bring us down. That's the way. And I was picturing before he did the bear example, I was literally picturing like in my mind, you know, things in the brain like fighting with each other. Like, no, I'm stronger. No, I am. Because they fight the suppressor and the analyzer or however. That's what I was picturing. I have an interesting imagination. Okay. Okay. Life is much more complicated than the business of killing grizzlies. Usually a lot less dramatic, but always full of situations which cause a fluctuation of the suppressor. The gaining of all pleasurable goals, a bear killed, a woman kissed, a seat in the front row at the opera, a friend won, an apple stolen, are sweeps through various levels of tone. And the individual is generally carrying on 3 or 3,000 computations at once, and there are 30 or 30,000 variables in his computations. Too many unknowns, too many entrances of didn't know the gun was loaded factors. All these can throw the analyzer from a direct alignment into the scattered dispersal of non-function. So it can throw the brain from a direct alignment into the scattered dispersal of non-function. So your brain gets too much information and too many computations. And I actually had that happen to me. When I first got sick and I was in the hospital, I kept saying my body would spasm every time I tried to move. So I literally wouldn't move. And the day before they were releasing me, this neurologist came in and I said, it's like my brain won't listen to my body. And he said, no, your brain is sending too many messages to your body. And so my body just shut down. And so I've actually experienced what he just said. Weird. All right. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to get a little bit more comfortable. The analyzer can be considered to cut out when tone 2.0 is reached. From 2.5 down, the computations it makes are not very rational. Too many unknowns, too many unexpected factors, too many discoveries of miscalculations. This is living on a clear basis. When our hunter was hit by the bear, he received an engram. That engram, when it keyed in, would give him a fear, an apathy attitude in the presence of certain factors. Every perceptic present, the smell of the ground, twigs, bear breath, etc. But he killed the bear. The chances of that engram keying in are remote. Not because he killed the bear, but because he was, after all, a grown man. And if a clear, he could have thought back and cleared the whole thing himself. Oh my goodness. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So I thought as a clear, you couldn't get engrams. But what he just said was, as a clear, if you get an engram, you can clear it out again. Okay. This is a complete cycle of emotion. Enthusiasm and high pleasure are at the extreme top. Fear and paralysis are at the bottom. Feigned death in man is very close to the actual thing on the tone scale. It is a valid mechanism, but it is complete apathy. So long as the analyzer is operating, the receipt of an engram is impossible. Everything files in the standard banks. As soon as the border 2.0 is passed on the way down, unconsciousness can be judged to have set in, and anything registered in the company with pain or painful emotion is an engram. This is not a shift of definition. The analyzer cuts out with surgical anesthetic at 2.0. Oh, so he's talking about the unconsciousness again. So if you are under anesthetic, you're at 2.0, which is low. The anesthetic may depress the level of awareness further. Pain may depress it even more. But depressing the level of awareness is not necessarily depressing emotion. How much conceived danger or sympathy is present in the environment? This is what depresses the tone scale. There can be a reactive engram which contains a tone 4.0 or one that contains 1.0 or another that contains 0.1. This is not then quite two-dimensional, this emotion. Now, how can you have an engram at a 4.0 when that's high, pleasure and emotion? You're in a good mood, good things are happening. But an engram is only caused by painful emotion or actual pain. He's going to have to explain that further to me. If he cleared, I don't know. I'm not sure where that was. If he cleared the whole thing up himself, is that what you meant? I think Dianetics was based on some of Freud's work, which Freud later scratched because he said it was hypnotic. I will have to double check. That would make sense because of so much of the beginning of the book, he talked about hypnosis and shutting someone down to a point of unconsciousness or zombie-like behavior, and then re-stimulating trauma to shut the brain down. And we realize that's what he's doing to Sea Organ staff, because they're, and even public, but a lot of the Sea Organ staff, they're constantly going. They're in an unkind environment, so they're constantly receiving trauma, either before then or during, And then it's constantly getting restimulated, and he's able to mind control them. You guys. He didn't actually say he did hypnosis. He did say that he was either in on or knew about, like, tests with hypnosis. You never can tell with that guy if he actually did or not. I think he did, especially back in the day, like 60s, 70s. That was kind of a big thing. And so yeah, he knows a great deal about hypnosis and how to re-stimulate trauma. I don't know how he learned that in the 50s. And that's the environment he puts everybody in, working them with lack of sleep. And in, they're in substandard conditions if they're living in, they're birthing. And the org itself, or the bases themselves, or whatever organization they're in, nobody's allowed to be kind. You get told, there's a derogatory term, I keep forgetting what it is. If you're kind, they call you it. I can't remember what it was. AA, maybe So you can't see to be a personable kind of person. So they make you be, unkind to each other. And then it's the constant snitching on each other. And I know he got that from Adolf and the propaganda that went on there, because that's how he controlled a whole country, was the snitching culture. You got to worry about your neighbor. You got to worry about, so you can't become friends with. Even Jenna Miscavige said that if you became friends with somebody and they saw that, they would move one of you far away. I think that's why so many married couples found themselves separated in other states, other countries for years at a time, because they didn't even want the marriages, people being married, to have a good relationship. Yep, constantly triggered and sleep deprived. And that sleep deprived alone makes your brain, your mind malleable. Did he say and it was something you received when you were unconscious, or did? No, you're right, Tammy. You probably, I don't know if he talked about that a lot earlier on. An engram is when you're in an unconscious state. So his example was, if a woman gets punched out and she's unconscious, and while she's unconscious, she hears a trolley car outside. She hears a dog barking. The guy that knocked her out is saying, "You're worthless. You can't make a decision. You're a piece of crap." And something, and then later on, what re-stimulates it, if you hear a trolley car, if you hear a dog barking, if you smell a certain smell, and then those things come back and they control your reactive mind. Your reactive mind is just your subconscious. So he's working all in the subconscious, and the reactive mind, or the analytical mind, is your regular brain. So that's kind of how he breaks that down. And in an engram, a re-stimulated engram, a trauma. So an engram is a trauma. That's the best way to describe it. But he said the only way to have an engram is for it to be a painful emotion, or an actually physically painful experience. And then that's why they do quiet births in Scientology, because then that baby, if they're loud and they're screaming and that baby's going through the traumatic experience of being birthed, and that the mom screaming will cause that baby to have an engram for the rest of his life, or until it becomes clear. Does that explain that, Tammy? That's what I thought. Personally, I've not been unconscious too many times in my life, except maybe surgery, unless he's talking about when you are asleep. No. He also, this is where he went into hypnosis, and how we were like, oh my God, this is how he's mind controlling everyone in Scientology. He said constantly restimulating a trauma will cause your part of your brain to shut down, so that you're just shut down and walking around almost zombie like in your brain, and that you're easily controlled. Now, he was stating this in a way that he was going to fix it. But in reality, we were all reading it as, on the outside looking in and knowing what we know about Scientology and going, oh my gosh, he is laying out his cult. He is literally laying out. If you want to know, Tammy, go back to, what chapter was that? I think it was the demons. I'm not going to look now, Tammy. What I'll do is when I get off, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look. I'm going to figure out which episode it was, and I'll put it in the description, a link. Go watch. It was actually the second half of a very long chapter, and we were all like, oh my gosh, he is literally telling us how he is controlling people, mostly the Sea Organ staff, because he's putting them in horrible conditions. He's constantly restimulating the trauma of those conditions. And so he's putting them in this zombie-like, that's why people on the outside don't understand, how can these people be in this environment and not think for themselves? And that's why, because they're in there for years, they're in this environment, and it causes, them to be in this state of, easily brainwashed. That's why us being on the outside don't understand it, because we try to put ourselves in a good situation so that we're in a good mental state and we don't go through that. But anybody that's been in any kind of traumatic long-term, family relationship place is gonna suffer something similar. Oh yeah, and they're food deprived, so they're not allowed to see a doctor. So a lot of times they're in pain. They're not allowed to say they're in pain, because if you're a clear, you're not allowed to feel pain. You're supposed to be able to overcome that. There are many times where he actually tells you how he's brainwashing you. It's wild. It was wild. It was very wild. I'm gonna try to maybe clip some of that. I'm still learning to edit. It scares the crap out of me, because I did say I wanted to do a short video about what we read about. So I'm either going to clip it, and if it's not short enough, then I'll just do a quick read of that section and what he was actually saying. Because I said, oh, people like Nora and, people that have gotten out would be interested. And then literally not long after that, Nora did a show about trauma. She's been through therapy, so she actually got what was going on with her, about the trauma. So she actually already gets it because she's been through therapy. So she wouldn't need it. You have no time to think when you are in. You have no time to yourself, so you have no time to introspect. And that's what he talked about with, getting people to shut down, keeping them in a constant restimulated state, restimulating trauma over and over and over again, so that you're constantly like this. My disease, actually, my fight or flight mechanism is broken. It's constantly on. So I'm constantly like this. And my husband will just walk in the room unexpectedly, and I'll scream, because I get startled so easy, because that part of the brain is impacted by my disease. So I can understand it a little bit. I literally have to get injections through here, from my base of my skull, out my shoulders, down the middle of my back, every 4 weeks, with just lidocaine, no medicine, because the needling going into my muscle releases the knots. It's like acupuncture, but a little more invasive. And because my disease makes me like this, I literally will lay in a comfortable bed and not feel comfort at all, because I'm just so tight all the time and I'm constantly tense. And so I can kind of get a little glimpse into what they're going through. It's it's small compared to and something else that could be wrong with me. I'm learning that it's been 14 years now, so the shots help a lot, and I know that that's what's wrong. So my husband came in the other day and scared the crap out of me because he's supposed to be asleep, and he's so quiet. He did martial arts in high school, so he's like a cat. He is so quiet. He'll just appear in front of me in the living room. So anyway, I hope that explains it. Like I said, I need to get off my lazy butt and make these short videos. But I can't remember exactly. It was the really long chapter. I think it was the second half of the reactive mind. That sounds right. But I'll go check. All right, let's keep moving because we still got quite a few pages. Where are we? We're almost at an hour. We may cut this in half. We'll see where we are. Let me get some water while I'm doing it. But anyway, the reason I'm talking so at length about it, because for a never end, it was an epiphany of like, oh my gosh, he's literally laying out how he's going to run his cult. And that's what they've been doing for 70 years. And I know he didn't come up with that himself. He studied that crap so that he could use it. I know he did. And then he clothed it in Dianetics and said, I'm going to help you with this. And instead, he's actually doing it to you. Oh, thanks, Diana. Where are we? The engram. Oh, we looked at the keyed in. Okay, so keyed in means re-stimulated. So keyed in an engram means a re-stimulated trauma in the real world. He keeps you in a constant state of hypervigilance. Exactly. Somebody else said it might have been UAA, I'm not sure. It might have been you, said you always felt uneasy all the time in there. Because think about it, you never have time to yourself. You're living in bunk beds. You have to share a room. You're never alone. You're constantly going, and you're constantly vigilant of your surroundings because somebody might snitch on you and you might need to snitch on somebody else, and you can't think bad thoughts. You're not even allowed to think bad thoughts. Why? Because you'll go into auditing session and then maybe a sec check, which is more of an interrogation, and you're afraid all the time of this. So it totally made so much sense. My approach to reading Dianetics is to understand what he was trying to say when he wrote it. We are too. This would have been before a cult was started, trying to understand from his perspective why it went viral. I think he had the thought of the religion when he wrote this, because he told, and I got the guy's name too, who he said it to. He said his science fiction books were, I would like to know when he said it though, to see that his science fiction books weren't earning him enough money to make money. He needed to start a religion. So from the time he got out of World War II to the time he wrote this book was about 9 years. He had 9 years to study up. And we know that he also hung out with Aleister Crowley. Is it Jim Parsons? That was a lot of brainwashing. So maybe he wasn't thinking cult, but I think he studied how to mind control people a little, because he started the Dianetics centers. He was trying to get people in, trying to get them to spend money. I think he started the Sea Org pretty early on, and he might have had that plan. I mean, the guy was a science fiction writer. He had a lot of thoughts, and he wrote a lot. So, but we do the same thing. I try to think at the time he wrote it in 1954, what psychotherapy was like. And then people who read this, what life was like for them. And that there wasn't a lot of mental health help. And that they probably read this thinking, oh my God, I need help. This guy said he's going to cure me. Let's go. And then it wasn't until the internet 20 years ago or more, that people started knowing more about it, and that it was not what it pertains. So I look at it both ways. I look at it in knowing what I know now about the church, and I also try to look at it as what would I have thought in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s if I looked at this book. So, but yeah. So at the very least, he was laying some sort of groundwork, for something, for at least maybe this was Dianetics. Maybe he wasn't planning on Scientology, but he was planning on something. He just didn't have it quite fleshed out yet, maybe. Okay, we talked too long. I gotta get moving. This is a long one. All right, so I read that already. Where are we? 4.0. The level of depth of consciousness can be affected by painful emotion, poisons, or other things which depress awareness. After that, it is all engram. And the engrams have their own tone scale, which runs from 4.0 down to 0.1. It can be seen now that two things are at work. First is the state of physical being. It is this which tunes down the analyzer, the brain. Then there is the mental state of being. This is what tunes down the emotional tone scale. But remember that in engrams, there is another factor present, valence. Now, valence just means personality, like another's personality in the engram being pushed on you, or, he'll probably talk about it a little bit more. But that's what that word means. He likes to change. He could have just said personality, but he has to say valence. Once its own analyzer is out, the body will assume the evaluation or emotional condition of any other analyzer present. Here we have affinity at work in earnest. Unconsciousness in the presence of other beings, an individual picks up a valence for every other being present. So they pick up every personality in present during an engram or a painful unconscious event. Some of these valences are incidental. He will pick first that valence which is most sympathetic as a desirable future friend or some similar person, and he will pick that valence which is the top valence, highest survival, the boss, the winner, for his dramatization. He will also take the valence of the winning entity, winning over himself or others, for emotional tone. If the winning valence is also the sympathetic valence, he has an engram which can be utilized to its fullest extent. Let us make this an example. A man is under nitrous oxide, the most vicious anesthetic ever invented, as it is actually not anesthetic, but a hypnotic, undergoing exodentistry, extraction of teeth. That's what that means. Patient chatters and yaps about the patient, the weather, the most popular movie star, or baseball. The exodontist is a tough character, bossy to the nurse, apt to be angry about trifles. He is also very sympathetic toward the patient. The nurse is blue-eyed blonde who is sexually aberrated. The patient actually in agony, receiving an engram amongst engrams which may ruin his life. Terrible stuff. Nitrous oxide really hands out a fancy engram, as any Dianeticist can attest. Is unanalytical. Everything said to him or around him is taken literally. He takes the valence of the exodontist as both the top valence present and the sympathetic balance. But every phrase uttered is aberrative and will be interpreted by that happy little moron, the reactive mind, subconscious, on the order of Simple Simon, who was told he had to be careful how he stepped in the pies, so he stepped in them carefully. These people may be talking about somebody else, but every I or he or you uttered is engrammic. and will be applied to others and himself by the patient in the most literal sense. He can't remember anything, says the exodontist. All right, when the engram keys in, this patient will have an occlusion on memory in greater or lesser degree. He can't see it or feel it. This means an occlusion on sight, pain, and tactile. If the patient has his eyes watering in agony at the moment, though completely under, he may get actual bad vision as well as poor visual recall from this experience. Now they put him in the hands of this blonde nurse to let him sleep off the drug and recover. She is an aberree amongst aberrees. She knows patients do weird things when they are still out, so she pumps him for information about his life. And she knows they are hypnotic. Yes, she sure does. So she gives him some positive suggestions. Amusing herself, she says he'll like her, that she'll be good to him, and stay there now for the present. So the poor patient, who has had 2 wisdom teeth impacted taken out, has a full anger sympathy dramatization. The general tone he takes is the tone the exodontist showed to the others in the room. The exodontist was angry at the nurse. With his recalls all messed up, the patient, a few years later, meets a woman similar to this nurse. The nurse has given him compulsions toward her. The silly little moron, the reactive mind, sees in this entirely different person enough similarity to create an identity between the nurse and this new woman. So the patient divorces his wife and marries the pseudo nurse. That's dramatic. Only now that he has married the pseudo nurse, the dental engram begins to key in earnest. Physically, he gets ill. The 2 molars adjacent to where the wisdom teeth come out develop large cavities and begin to rot. Circulation shut down, pain in the area, but can't be felt because there's a pain recall shutoff. His memory goes to pieces. His recalls become worse. He begins to develop eye trouble and a strange conjunctivitis. Further, because the dentist leaned on his chest and stomach with a sharp elbow from time to time, he has chest and stomach pains. The nitrous oxide hurt his lungs, and this pain is also in chronic restimulation. But most horrible, he believes that the pseudo nurse will take care of him, and he stops to some degree taking care of himself in any way. His energy dissipates, and analytically he knows it is all wrong and that he is not himself, for he is now fixed in the valence of the exodontist, who is angry with this nurse, and so he beats the pseudo nurse because he senses that from her all evil flows. The girl he married is not and was not the nurse. She sounds something like her and is a blonde, but she has her own engrams and reacts. She attempts suicide. Then one day, since this is one engram among many, the mental hospital gets our patient, and the doctors there decide that all he needs is a good solid series of electric shocks to tear his brain up. And if that doesn't work, a nice ice pick into each eyeball after and during electric shock. Jeez. The ice pick sweeping a wide arc to tear the analytical mind to pieces. His wife agrees. Our patient can't defend himself. He's insane, and the insane have no rights, you know. Hi, Susan. Only the cavalry in this one case arrived in the form of Dianetics. Oh, the cavalry. And cleared the patient and the wife, and they are happy today. If he had a lobotomy and electric shock, how is he even coherent? That's just my question. They are happy today. This is an actual engram and an actual case history. It is a sympathy engram, pro-survival on the moronic reactive mind level. This is to show the ebb and flow of emotion within this one engram. The physical being is out and in agony. The mental being is given a variety of emotional tones on a contagion principle. The actual emotional tone of the patient, his own, is beaten apathy. Hence, he can no longer be himself. Oh, it's all right, Susan. In passing, it should be mentioned that only absolute silence, utter silence, and tomb-like silence should attend an operation or injury of any kind. Here we go. There is nothing which can be said or given as a perceptic in any moment of unconsciousness which is beneficial to a patient. Nothing. In the light of these researches and scientific findings, because you know all the science he did, which can be proven in any other laboratory or group of people in very short order, speech or sound in the vicinity of an unconscious person should be punished criminally, as to anyone who knows these facts, such as act would be willful effort to destroy the intellect or mental balance of an individual. If the patient is complimented, as in hypnosis or during an injury or operation, a manic is formed which will give him temporary euphoria and eventually plunge him into the depressive stage of the cycle. Now, I think it's a bit overreaction, but I can see, because I can see how that might be a thought process, because they say to talk to people who are in comas and they hear you. So people that are under anesthesia or nitrous oxide, yeah, they can still hear. I don't know if it would mess you up as bad as he says, but I think it, it goes into the hypnosis idea again. I wonder how much of that story is based on his personal experience. I do know he had nitrous oxide at the age of 11 and claims to have had an out-of-body experience. Yeah, I think I heard that too. Now, I had 4 wisdom teeth cut out when I was 19. They hadn't come in at all. And I know when I woke up, the nurse had to smack me. I woke up crying and screaming about the pain, which I think I could still feel the pain. I was just knocked out. And they do say people in surgery, sometimes they wake up a little bit during a very invasive operation and they don't remember what that was, but they have. I do remember this guy. He was messed up. He woke completely up during a very invasive operation and they knocked him back out. And the doctor and nurses said nothing about it. They said, shut up. And he started having nightmares and it messed him up for life. When they finally found out, of course he sued, they found out what had happened somehow, I don't know. So yeah, it's possible, but I don't think every single time something like that's going to happen. Sign me up for that out-of-body experience. I'd love to look like Beyonce. So, I mean, I can see where the premise kind of comes from, but he's taken it to a whole nother level, as Aaron will say. And the quiet births and all that, I don't, that's a bit stretched out, And I'm still confused as how that guy is happy and having a great life after having a lobotomy and shaking up his brain. Because most people, so there's the one where they just would go in straight and that's it. Then there's the one they would go in and move it around and literally tear up your frontal lobe. After that, you can't even take care of yourself, let alone speak. So I don't know how much of that was true. I think he embellished. All right. The golden rule could be altered to read, if you love your brother, keep your mouth shut when he is unconscious. I wish I would have read that before I talked. That's hilarious. Keep your mouth shut when he is unconscious. Emotion can be seen to exist in two planes, the personal plane and the extravalence plane. It is communicable in terms of identical thinking. Rage present when a man is unconscious will give him a tone 1 engram. It will contain rage. Apathy present in the vicinity of an unconscious person will give him a tone 0 engram. Happiness present during an engram is not very aberrative, but will give a tone 4 engram, and so forth. Well, isn't that a good engram? Yeah, how do you even function after lobotomy? You don't. Not really. You really don't. I know some people can still speak, but it's like you're not normal ever again. So he's saying that you can have a good engram. And when before it was every engram was horrible. And so forth. In other words, the emotions of the present around an unconscious person are communicated into the person as part of his engram. Any mood can be so communicated. And I've seen this in coma patients too, where people have gone in and they talk to them and they're positive, and that person wakes up, and even if they can't remember the exact words, they remember the tone. Not every person in a coma remembers, but it's possible. I don't remember how old he was when he read Aleister Crowley's book. Crowley claims to have had an out-of-body experience or astro traveled. Maybe Ellerate said he had one based on Crowley, just guessing. Could be. Yeah, I don't either. I don't know that much about it. His book. That might be something I look into. Because we know he studied with him for a little while. In dramatizing an engram, the aberree always takes the winning balance, and that balance is not, of course, himself. If only one other person is present and the other is talking in terms of apathy, then the apathy is the tone value of the engram. When an apathy engram is restimulated, the individual, unless he wants to be hurt severely, is apathetic, and this tone, being the nearest to death, is the most dangerous one to the individual. The rage emotion communicated to an unconscious person gives him a rage engram he can dramatize. This is most harmful to the society. A merely hostile tone present around an unconscious person gives him a merely hostile engram, covert hostility. With two people present, each having a different mood, the unconscious person receives an engram with two valences other than his own. When this happens, he will first dramatize the winning balance with its mood, and, if forced from this, will dramatize the second balance with its mood. Driven from this in a chronic engram, he goes insane. Yeah, he liked to borrow other people's works for sure. Anything he could use, he took. I usually don't need mods when I'm not vertical. I can usually handle it. So that's fine. So, you know what I'm seeing here, though? He's saying you have to be unconscious to have this happen. But to me, this is similar to when you're, being abused in a relationship, or especially like as a child. Some of those people become abusers. You don't have to be unconscious to take on a dominant personality. So, um, he's saying you have to be unconscious, but I don't think you do in a lot of ways. But I don't think he's delving into that. He's trying to make it, more. I don't know why, but That's just the thought I had. All right, so he goes insane. Nothing here should be construed to mean that a person only uses or dramatizes sympathy engrams. This is very far from the case. The sympathy engram gives him the chronic psychosomatic illness. He can dramatize any engram he has when it is restimulated. Emotion then is communication and a personal condition. The cellular level evaluation of a situation depends upon any other analyzer present, even if that analyzer is thoroughly hostile to it. Lacking such evaluation, the individual takes his own tone for the moment. There is another condition of emotion, which is, let's see how much further we have. Okay, we're going to finish it. There's only a couple more pages. All right. There is another condition of emotion which is of extreme and useful interest to the therapist, since it is the first thing with which he will have to deal in opening a case. We do not mean here to start discussing therapy, but to describe a necessary part of emotion, of course. Great loss and other swift and severe suppressor actions dams up emotion in an engram. Loss itself can be a shock to reduce analytical power, and an engram is received. If it is the loss of a sympathetic person on whom an individual has depended, it seems to the individual as if death itself stalks him. When such a suppressor effect occurs, it is as if a strong steel spring had been compressed within the engram. When it releases, it comes with a terrible rush of emotion. If this discharge is indeed emotion, though we hardly know what other name to call it. Life force apparently gets dammed up at these points in life. There may be enormous quantities of that life force available, but some of it becomes suppressed into a lost engram. After that, the person does not seem to possess as much fluid vitality as before. This may be not emotion, but life force itself. The mind then has below it, as in a cyst, a great quantity of sorrow or despair. The more of these charges exist in such an encysted state, that less free are the emotions of the individual. This may be on a basis of suppression to a point from which there is no swift rising. It kind of makes me think of how in Scientology, Sea Org staff, etc., that they're suppressed by the leader, the rules, the people around them, the policies, the lifestyle is all suppression. So it's constantly suppressing. The glory and color of childhood vanishes as one progresses into later years. But the strange part of it is that this glamour and beauty and sensitivity to life are not gone. They are insisted. And this is CYST, like assist. They are insisted. One of the most remarkable experience a clear has is to find in the process of therapy that he is recovering appreciation of the beauty in the world. Persons, as they live forward from childhood, suffer loss after loss, and each loss takes from them a little more of this O or zero quantity, which may be in or theta. I don't know if I'm supposed to say theta there for that symbol. So I'm going to say that. Let's say that again. Each loss takes from them a little more of this theta quantity, which may be indeed life force itself. That sounds better. Bound up within them, that force is denied them and indeed reacts against them. Only this emotional insisting can, for instance, compartment the mind of a person who is multivalent, multi-personality, or who cannot see or hear his past. The analytical mind, worked upon by the reactive bank, compartments and divides with loss after loss until there is no free flow left. Then a man dies. Thus, we could say that emotion, or what has been called emotion, is really in two sections. First, there is the endocrine system, which, handled either by the analytical mind in the upper two zones or the reactive mind in the lower two zones, brings emotional responses of fear, enthusiasm, apathy, etc. Second, there would be life force itself, becoming compartmented by engrams and being sealed up little by little in the reactive bank. It is possible that a therapy could be formulated which would spring out these various life force charges only and create thereby a full clear. Unfortunately, to date, this has not been possible. Now, he used the word, that symbol that he called, first page, theta. So I think we're starting to get into the realm of where he eventually talks about thetans and thetas, and that thetans are attached to your body and make you sick. So right now he's starting to, work that idea in of this life force and not just emotion. So theta equals life force. Makes sense. Okay. The odd part of emotion is that it is so ordinarily based on the word content of engrams. If an engram says, I am afraid, then the aberry is afraid. If an engram says, I am calm, even if the rest of the engram gives him chattering shakes, the aberry still has to be calm. The problem of emotion as an endocrine balance and life force has another complication in that the physical pain in an engram is often mistaken for a particular emotion named in the engram. For instance, the engram can say with verbal content that the individual is physically excited and have as a pain content an ache in the legs, and have as an actual emotion content the balance that says I'm physically excited. Anger, this to the aberry dramatizing it, is a complex affair. When he is physically excited, he has an idea that means as just language, he is also angry and has an ache in the legs. This is actually very amusing in many cases and has led to a standard set of clinical jokes, all of which begin with, I feel like everybody else. That makes sense. Dianeticists, having discovered that people evaluate the emotions, beliefs, intelligence, and somatics of the world in terms of their own engramic reactions, delight in discovering new concepts of emotion. You know how people feel when they're happy. Their ears burn. I feel just like anybody else when I'm happy. My feet and eyes ache. Of course, I know how people feel when they're happy, just pin prickles going all over them. I wonder how people can stand to be passionate when it makes their noses hurt so. Of course, I know how people feel when they're excited. They have to go to the toilet. Okay, I don't know any doctors that have those jokes, but okay. Probably every person on earth has his own peculiar definition for every emotional state in terms of engram command. The command plus the somatics and perceptics make what they call an emotional state. Actually, the problem then should be defined in terms of the clear, who can function without engramic orders from the reactive mind. So defined, it breaks down in terms of the endocrine system and the varying level of life force free to resurge against the suppressor. Laughter, it should be added, is not, strictly speaking, an emotion, but a relief from emotion. The early Italians had a very definite idea, as represented by their folk tales, that laughter was of therapeutic value. Melancholy was the only mental illness these tales consider, and laughter was its only cure. In Dianetics, we have a great deal to do with laughter. In therapy, patients vary in their laughter reaction from the slight chuckle to the hilarious mirth. Any engram which really releases may be expected to begin somewhere between tears and boredom and end with laughter. The nearer the engram's tone is to tears at the first contact, the more certainly laughter will appear as it is relieved. Hmm? That's interesting. I've heard people say that before, Diana. Um, Being unconscious and floating above yourself. I've heard of that. Oh, where was I? Laughter, 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 laughter. Okay. There is a stage of therapy often reached by the pre-clear when his entire past life seems to be a subject of uncontrollable mirth. This does not mean he is clear, but it means that a large proportion of the insisted charges have been tapped. A pre-clear has laughed for 2 days almost without ceasing. Hepiphrenia, a form of aberration characterized by childish or silly behavior, is not the same thing as this laughter. For the relief of the pre-clear on realizing the shadowy aspect and completely knowable character of his past fears and terrors is hearty. Oh, hang on. I think my whole entire channel, if you click in at any time, I'm drinking water. I do that a lot. All right. Laughter plays a definite role in therapy. It is quite amusing to see a pre-clear who has been haunted by an engram which contained great emotional charge suddenly relieve it. For the situation, no matter how gruesome it was, when relieved, is in all its aspect a subject of great mirth. The laughter fades away as he becomes disinterested in it, and he can be said to be tone 3 about it. Laughter is definitely the relief of painful emotion. End of chapter. Do you remember? Oh, that's neat, Tammy. That might be something we could talk about a little bit. Yeah, that probably wasn't a very good thing. So the next, oh, this is gonna be fun. You moms out there might be interested in this one. Prenatal experience and birth. That's the next chapter. So he's gonna really go. No wonder they're. I mean, I think it was Reese that said it. Not 100%. Well, she worked at a dentist's office, so I don't know if I think it was her. She needed a dental procedure done, and she wouldn't go under. She wouldn't even get Novocaine. I think they took that a little far because it's the nitrous oxide that they say has the problem in being unconscious. So I would think lidocaine or Novocaine would be okay. And I'm just like, so and that's not. It's still about 15 pages, but so the next couple chapters look interesting. Prenatal experience and birth. So we talked about the tones of the engrams, and then we're going to go right into why Scientologists have their ideas about birth. Let me look. The Probably does. That's kind of an important word in Scientology. Oh, so get this. It's under T. I don't know if you can see it, but it's under that Greek symbol, the weird O. So the Greek symbol for theta, it just says the eighth letter in the Greek alphabet. Greek for thought or life or the spirit. Now, whenever I say body thetans, body thetans go from body to body in their, belief system. To other people, I'll say probably what we would consider the soul or the spirit. So, and he actually said, or the spirit. So, for thought, life, or the spirit. So, that's what theta is. So, when you talk about thetans floating around and being attached to your body and stuff, I believe, if I remember this right, the reason they're trying to go clear and go up the bridge is you're trying to get rid of the body thetans, and a lot of them don't find this out till later on, that are attached to you, that are sick and insane, and you have thousands of them attached to you, and you have to clear them off. You have to get rid of them. And that's from just listening to ex-members. I'm not an authority on the subject. So that was long. Actually, it wasn't as bad. It was just that first part with numbers. When he starts throwing numbers in there, it's hard to remember and think. But I get the idea of what he means. For him, 0 tone scale is you die. 4 tone scale is you're happy as a clam. Oh, wait, they talk about clams in there too. So we're going to go into the engrams and experience at birth. This should be interesting. I think that one will be interesting because we know even John Travolta and his wife had a quiet birth, and he talked about it. You could probably look that up on YouTube somewhere on the internet. I believe he talked about it in an interview. Since that was long, we're at an hour and 30 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and go. But this, so in the chat, people are mentioning out-of-body experiences, and astral projection. And I don't know how much, AA, you would know better. How much is that talked about in Scientology? I thought they do think that in the upper OT levels that they can do that and make things happen. Or is that too much of a stretch? I know that they think they have the power of the mind over matter and they can make things happen because they're an OT and they have superpowers. The aim of Scientology is to achieve a state of being constantly out of body. Oh, okay. It's a lot. So that might be something we want to talk about. I bet, does he get into it more later on in Dianetics? You know what? Let me see if it's in the index. Let's look under A and O. See if he talks about it. A. He might not call it that because he has his own words. Nothing under A. O. No, not really. However, it is an actual phenomenon. You can go out of body at will. Certain yogis. I've heard of it else, all kinds of places. I'm 55. I've heard about it quite a bit here and there from different things. Watched a lot of things on it, mostly. Okay, that was the index. Let's see. Out. No. I don't. He may not actually use those terms. I'll bet he likes to use his own ways of explaining things. AS. No, it's not in the index or the glossary, so he may not actually say it, but I'm sure it'll be discussed a little bit more. I read when this book was first published, they printed 6,000 copies. By the end of 1950, 150,000 were sold, and there were quite a few scientists jumping on board of this theory. Got out just as quick. Yeah. Also, the way he sold a lot, from what I understand, don't quote me 100% on this, is that they also printed it in many different languages so that they could get books sold. But it was a phenomenon, right at first. Before, oh, sorry, I just hit the table. I'm trying to stretch my legs out. I'm trying to get into my craft room and get it cleaned up so that I can have a desk chair set up for doing this. But for now, we're still on the chase, which means my hips hurt. Yeah, like I said, they had Dianetics centers long before Scientology, and there still are some Dianetics centers. And I've seen in their bookstore, they've got Dianetics in Spanish, at least, in the bookstore. He calls it stably exterior. Let me see if that's in there. Going exterior is his terminology. Going exterior. Let's see if that's exterior. Let's check under S. No, I'm not seeing it. And that's the glossary. I'll look it up and see if it's in this book or it comes in later. See what I can find. Let me write that down or I'll forget. Hold on. Okay. Let's see. Going exterior or stably exterior. Going exterior. Okay, got that. I didn't look under G. No, it's not in here. But I'll see if I can check that out. I found a classified CIA document that has been unclassified called the Gateway Experience. They teach how to astro travel, working on it, but having achieved it, I am going through the Gateway lessons. You need to watch the Y-Files. Do you know who that is? It's only after Dianetics that he talks about, okay, going exterior is not part of Dianetics. Okay. He starts talking about it in Dianetics 55, which is another book. I saw that. I wasn't sure what that was. I thought it was a 55-year, special. Do you still need watch hours? If so, I can help you with that. I can start. No, I'm monetized now. Yay! So it's up to you guys at this point. More watch hours means I get a little bit more ad revenue, but like I was saying, most of my revenue that I have, it's still sitting in there because I haven't put together gone in and put in my information to get paid. But I'm glad I didn't worry about it last month, because it did say until you reach $100, they don't pay out. So I'm over $100 now. I was saying my last live stream, I was like, I have about $160 in there. Most of that is uh, gifted memberships. I think a good 80% of that is gifted memberships, and then there's a little bit of ad revenue. So I'm going to buy my reflective umbrella so that that hooks to my chair, so that I can sit over on the side where they try to sneak in the side door, and then the rest is gas and parking. So that'll be nice to have a little bit of that. Because I told people I'll be open and honest about how much money I'm making, because I know a lot of other smaller streamers want to know. I've always wanted to know, but they say you really can't, there's so many factors involved. So it's really up to you guys. Like I said, I'd rather YouTube pay me than worry about memberships, but Pup Grimmer had a really good reason why she gifts memberships, and I thought it was smart. I like to see it. A lot of people do, because it's fun. It's a way to support the channel and give people in the chat something too. So everybody wins. What she said also, what that'll do is people that may not have become a member on their own will now engage more with the channel, and that'll help the algorithm to maybe help the channel be seen more, is from what I understand. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. And she literally has a budget she goes in and gets memberships for that reason. So I thought that was a really neat thing she talked about. Let me change my glasses so I can, you don't have to look up my nose. There we go. So, yep, I'm monetized. I got monetized last month. I think the creators chat is called Positive Planet. OHN, oh hell no, told me she was going to send me the link, and I hadn't looked yet. So I'm probably going to do it, but I've had an aversion to Discord up until now. Even before I was part of this community, I'd never heard good things about it. And what's funny is you hear the term "so Discord" and as a bad thing, and then that whole thing is called Discord, and I'm like, I can see the positives of it too. How can I get a hold of those documents? Which documents were those? Oh, okay. But anyway, if you're looking into astral projection, and the CIA stuff, the Y files, he's a guy that talks about stuff like that. Now, a lot of times at the end, he'll debunk part of it. It's still he talks about the program that they did and people who were involved in it, and how like this one guy, he was 62% right, which is more than most, and how they would astral project, or they called it something else. What did they call it, Tammy? They remote viewing. They had the CIA and everybody had a program of remote viewing, and to get information during mainly a lot during the Cold War. As far as the CIA documents go, there are YouTube videos, that talk about it. I don't know where you could actually get the documents themselves, but look up CIA documents. Yes, I love the Y files. Me too. So definitely, it's called Y Files. It's a really great show. It's informative, debunking some, and funny, because he has a cohort called Hecklefish. It's a fish in a bowl that talks, and he's hilarious. So I'm like completely, I've watched all the compilations, all the shows, everything. And I just love it. I'm going to get me a hecklefish. You can get a stuffed hecklefish and pull it and he says things. It's hilarious. You got to go watch it. It's on YouTube. It's easy to find. I'm done. These are some interesting things to talk about. My husband calls me a hillbilly hippie. Reason being, so I come from like hillbillies, relatives and my ancestors and things. But in my life, I've read the Dalai Lama, I've done yoga, I read the yogi book. Even though I'm a Christian, I read it, but it doesn't change my belief systems. It just helps me understand other things. I like holistic medicine. I take a lot of herbs and supplements. So one day my husband called me, "You're a hillbilly hippie." So I named my craft business Hillbilly Hippie Designs because it's funny. And so I'm into all that kind of stuff. I believe that, and it works. With even my belief in God and Jesus, that because they created everything, I still believe that every living thing has a connection and energy to it. Like if I would have never been a Christian, I probably wouldn't been like a druid or something. And I know all about that stuff too. So it's all kind of interesting to me, and aliens and stuff, because in the original, without getting all religious, I try not to. But in the original King James version of the Bible in Genesis, it said God created worlds, plural. So that's why that I still think there's way too many planets out there for us to be the only ones. I just hope I don't want to meet them in my lifetime, because I just feel like anybody that's more powerful than us isn't going to come here and be all nice. So that's just my thought. So that was just an interesting chat at the end. I didn't get to do my late night stream last night. I didn't go to Austin yesterday because my son showed up. So I've been kind of missing it. So so this is Sunday. So I'm going to try to start this week. 3 times a week is my goal. So I haven't been hitting that goal there's always something getting in my way. So, wow. Hey, that's interesting stuff. Maybe, one of my, late night chats, I do them on Saturday because I'm a night owl. That would be fun to talk about. I'd like to talk about it some more. If you can make it that time of day. It's usually Saturday night at 10 Central Time. I know it's late for some people. I know not a lot of people will make it. It's just something I do just for fun. And then I'm trying to have members only streams. I was supposed to have a weekday one for people that can't do weekends or late evenings. And something, like I said, is always getting in the way. I swear. For somebody that has no life, I sure am getting things in the way. Yeah, Saturday, last Saturday, I didn't get to do because I was hanging with my son and we were doing stuff. But normally I like to do Saturday night at 10 p.m. Central. And we went last time 3 hours. So it's up to you if y'all want to stick that long. And I put the link out if you want to come on and talk. If you don't want to show your face, you can do voice only if you want to do that. So that's something I do on Saturday night too. So that's something I'm playing around with, learning how to do streaming and stuff. So this was fun, y'all. Look out for me this week. I said I've been trying to do the guerrilla style, like not giving advance notice, but I think every once in a while I'm gonna give advance notice. I think that's helpful for others. Because there's only been a couple times that they were already closed when I got there. So I don't think they watch me all the time, or it might have even been a coincidence. Somebody else might have been there before me that I didn't know about. So I will go ahead and like the night before, I might put it out so people are aware. So I'm not just, bam, there I am, which is what I've been doing lately. So this was super fun, you guys. And if I don't see you this week, then next Sunday at 3, we'll be on the next chapter. Y'all have a good rest of your night.